after a 3-day business trip, his leather shoes clacking softly against the hardwood floor. For 2 decades, this house had held echoes of laughter, the warmth of shared holidays, burnt toast on sleepy Saturdays, and late-night snuggles on the living room couch. But now, it felt unfamiliar, like someone had moved the furniture of his life when he wasn't looking. The house was too quiet. He set his suitcase down. "Lena," he called, his voice echoing. No answer. "Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. We're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin." He passed by the kitchen and noticed 2 coffee mugs in the sink. One had lipstick. The other had a cigarette burn on the rim. He didn't smoke. And Lena didn't allow anyone who did. Not unless they had history. Not unless they had permission. Still, Ethan didn't flinch. Not yet. He walked upstairs and entered the bedroom. Everything was clean. Too clean. The bed was made in a way his wife never made it. Crisp. Tucked. Cold. The silence was louder now. He turned on his phone, expecting texts from Lena. Maybe something mundane. Pick up milk or love you. Hurry home. Instead, he saw something else. A message thread from his teenage daughter, Aria. "Dad, please come home. We need to talk." Nothing more. He scrolled down. More unread messages. One from a blocked number, containing a single image. A picture of Lena, in the arms of someone else. Someone too familiar. Brady Mallard. Ethan's oldest friend. His best man. His fishing buddy. The man who helped build Ethan's marketing firm from scratch. And now, the man tangled up in sheets that weren't his. The phone slipped slightly in Ethan's palm, but his face remained unreadable. Years in business had trained him to swallow emotion like bitter coffee. Hot, dark, and deadly if left to sit too long. He heard footsteps downstairs. Slow, hesitant. "Dad," Aria's voice called. He turned, meeting her at the base of the staircase. Her eyes were puffy, guilt written across her like ink bleeding through paper. "I was going to tell you," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't know how." Ethan looked at her, really looked. His daughter, his blood, and suddenly, the betrayal cut deeper than just marriage. "You knew?" he asked, voice steady but chilling. She nodded, eyes welling again. "How long?" 3 months, she whispered. "It started before that, but I didn't want to break your heart." Ethan stared, then nodded slowly. Too late. He didn't yell, didn't throw anything. Instead, he walked to the study, pulled out a drawer, and retrieved an envelope he'd prepared months ago when he'd first had suspicions. The private investigator had delivered more than he ever asked for. Pictures, time logs, messages. He placed the envelope on the kitchen table, then looked at Aria. "Give this to your mother, and tell her, I'll see her in court." Court didn't go the way Ethan expected. Despite the evidence, despite the paternity test showing the unborn child Lena carried wasn't his, despite Brady being married himself, Judge Hallbrook raised a hand and sighed. "You two have 20 years of shared life. Property. A child. I'm ordering mandatory counseling before divorce proceedings can continue." Ethan didn't flinch, but Ron, his lawyer, leaned in and whispered, "This is insane. You want me to file an objection? You can't go through counseling with." Ethan just smiled. "No," he said. "Let them believe I'm broken, that I want peace." Ron squinted. "You got something planned?" Ethan's smile didn't fade. "Always." Across the room, Lena looked exhausted, wrapped in a shawl that barely hid her growing stomach. Brady wasn't present. Coward. The counseling sessions began. Week after week, Ethan sat on a beige couch next to Lena in a sterile room smelling of lavender and old resentment. The therapist asked questions. Lena wept. Ethan listened. Sometimes he spoke. Mostly he watched. Behind that calm exterior, his mind was a battlefield. At home, he'd started moving pieces, quietly transferring business shares, setting up separate trusts, building a legal fortress, reaching out to people who owed him favors, including Brady's wife, who had no clue her world was about to collapse. One night, Aria knocked on his door, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." He looked up from the papers he was reading. "I know you didn't." She sat beside him. "Mom says you're going to ruin her, that this isn't what family does." He turned to her slowly. "Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't hide truth. I'm not ruining her. She did that all on her own. But what about the baby? Ethan looked her dead in the eye. That baby isn't my responsibility. No, my concern. Let her figure out how to raise her mistake. Aria's lips trembled. Are you going to destroy her? No. Ethan replied softly. I'm going to let the truth destroy her. I'll just make sure everyone sees it. And he meant it. Lena sat in the therapist's office, fingers tightly knotted in her lap. It was their 5th session. The walls were lined with calming ocean paintings, and soft piano music played somewhere in the background. Dr. Moreno, the counselor, adjusted her glasses and looked between them. Lena, last session you said you felt unseen in your marriage, that you felt neglected emotionally. Do you want to elaborate? Lena nodded slowly, tears forming like clockwork. Ethan always worked. He built this empire, and I was proud. But somewhere along the line, he stopped seeing me. I became part of the furniture in our house, a shadow that made dinner, folded laundry, and smiled for pictures. Ethan tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. He didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself. I'm not saying what I did was right, Lena continued, her voice cracking. But I was lonely. Brady. He listened. He asked me how I felt. He noticed when I cut my hair or wore a new dress. I didn't plan to fall for him. It just happened. Dr. Moreno scribbled notes and turned to Ethan. Do you want to respond? Ethan leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. His voice, when it came, was low and precise. I gave you 20 years. Build a life for us from nothing. The kind of life our parents only dreamed about. I didn't just love you, Lena. I worshipped you. I left the office early to cook dinner some nights. You forgot that. I canceled board meetings to take you to chemo when you were sick. You forgot that, too. And as for noticing your hair, I didn't comment because I knew the moment I said something, you'd accuse me of being patronizing. You changed, Lena. You needed someone to blame, and I wasn't around to be your emotional punching bag anymore. So, you found someone closer. Lena flinched like his words were fists. Even Dr. Moreno looked momentarily shaken. I see, the therapist said after a pause. That's an honest assessment. Thank you for sharing. Ethan glanced at the clock. Are we done here? Yes, we're at time. Let's pick this up next week. As they left the office, Lena followed Ethan into the parking lot, her breath fogging in the cool autumn air. I don't understand this version of you, she said softly. You're so calm. It's like you don't feel anything. He looked at her, eyes calm as still water. I've already felt everything, Lena. I just don't have room for it anymore. Her voice trembled. Don't do this. Don't go nuclear on me. Ethan smiled faintly. You slept with my best friend. Lied for months. Let our daughter carry that secret. You were nuclear, Lena. I'm just making sure when the fallout hits, I'm not the one buried under the ash. Later that night, Ethan stood by the glass window of his study, watching the rain coat the street outside in shimmering waves. Aria had gone to her mother's place for the weekend. The house was quiet. Too quiet. He reached for the phone and dialed a number he'd memorized. It rang once. Hello. A shaky voice answered. Rachel, Ethan said softly. Brady's wife. There was a pause on the other end. I was hoping you'd call. I think it's time, he said. You deserve the truth. And I think I have the evidence you need. She exhaled, a sound of pain and relief tangled together. I knew something was wrong. He's been distant for months. But I never imagined. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll bring everything. The next morning, at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, Ethan slid a sealed folder across the table. Rachel opened it slowly, and as she flipped through the photos, receipts, and transcripts of messages, her expression went from puzzled to nauseated to devastated. She pressed her hand to her mouth. He told me he was going on retreats, business trips, that he was mentoring someone. But this is our family's ruin. Ethan's voice was low and calm. You've got 3 options. Confront him and forgive him, destroy him in court, or walk away quietly and let him think he's untouchable. Rachel looked up, her eyes glowing with something stronger than tears, clarity. I'm not walking away. Good, Ethan said, because neither am I. As he stood to leave, Rachel grabbed his arm. Why are you helping me? Ethan's smile was gentle this time. Because no one deserves to drown in someone else's lies. And because you're the only other person he didn't think would ever fight back. He walked out into the sunlight, the storm in his chest finally clearing into something colder, sharper. This wasn't just about Lena anymore. It was about showing everyone who betrayed him what happened when you crossed a man who had lost everything and had nothing left to protect but his dignity. And dignity, Ethan knew, was far more dangerous than vengeance. The following week unraveled like a noose tightening around the necks of everyone who had smiled while stabbing Ethan in the back. It began with whispers at Brady Mallard's office, anonymous emails sent to the board of directors, laced with attachments too damning to ignore. Pictures of Brady and Lena, hotel invoices, chat transcripts where he referred to Ethan's marriage as free game, the kind of receipts that couldn't be buried with a public apology or a weak excuse. By Wednesday, Brady was escorted out of his own firm by security. His shareholders turned on him. His wife, Rachel, had filed for divorce that morning with full custody claims and a court injunction freezing their joint accounts. And Ethan? He simply watched, quietly, from a distance, until Lena called him. The call came just after 11 p.m. Her voice trembled with panic. "They fired Brady," she whispered, like confessing it louder might collapse her reality. "His wife took the house. She's going after everything." Ethan didn't say a word. Lena exhaled into the silence. "He's staying at a motel. He said he's done with me, Ethan. He said this wasn't what he signed up for." "Interesting," Ethan replied coolly, "considering you had so much in common." Lena sniffled. "I know I deserve this. I do. But I never expected it to fall apart like this. You thought you could betray a man who bled for you and walk away with a fairy tale ending?" Ethan asked, his tone razor sharp. "You burned house down, Lena, and now you're upset there's smoke in your lungs." She broke. A full sob. "I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I need you." Ethan closed his eyes, leaning against the cold window glass of his study. "You needed me when you were lying beside another man, when you let our daughter hide it from me, when you came to counseling and cried for the cameras." Silence. Then he asked softly, "What did Arya say?" "She's confused," Lena whispered. "She feels caught in the middle." "No," Ethan said firmly. "She placed herself in the middle. She made a choice. You both did." The line went quiet again. Then Lena's voice returned, barely audible. "You always used to say we were stronger than anything." He laughed softly. "That was before I realized we meant nothing to you." And he hung up. 2 days later, Ethan met Arya at her college campus. She ran to him, desperate, tear-streaked, hugging him like the little girl who used to believe he could fix anything. "Please don't cut me off," she begged. "I didn't know how to handle it. I thought I was protecting you." "You weren't protecting me, Arya," he said gently. "You were protecting her. That's the difference." "I know," she said, burying her face in his shoulder. "I was wrong. But I need you, Dad. Please, please don't leave me behind with her." Ethan sighed, holding her for a long moment. His heart ached, not just with betrayal, but with the complicated grief only a parent could understand. "I'm not erasing you," he said, "but I need time. You don't get to lie and expect trust to be handed back with a ribbon." She nodded, swallowing guilt like fire. "I'll earn it back. I promise." The final blow came in the form of a charity gala, one Lena had once chaired annually with Ethan by her side, where they'd been photographed by every socialite magazine in the Northeast. This time, she attended alone. He arrived separately, dapper in a custom midnight blue suit, hair combed, smile steady. And on his arm, Rachel Mallard. Yes, Brady's ex-wife. They didn't need to say anything. Just walked through the marble entrance like royalty. And when they stepped onto the stage to present a surprise joint donation from both their newly founded nonprofits, the room erupted in gasps. Lena froze at her table, clutching the napkin in her lap like it could hold her sanity together. Rachel, graceful and poised, leaned into the microphone and said, "Sometimes pain leads us to purpose, and sometimes betrayal lights the fire we need to become better than we ever were." Ethan added, "And sometimes the people who walk away from us are simply making space for something far greater." Everyone clapped. Everyone except Lena. She sat there, alone, visibly pregnant, reputation in tatters, the friend she once paraded nowhere to be found. She watched the man she discarded now commanding the room with quiet power. And worst of all, he wasn't angry. He was free. She had torn their lives apart to chase a fantasy. He had rebuilt his life from the wreckage and made it look like art. That night, As Rachel and Ethan walked toward the exit, Ron, Ethan's lawyer, stood by the door and raised a glass to him. "I've never seen a smile like that," Ron said. Ethan simply nodded. "That's because," he replied, "this one's not for Lena. This smile's for me." Months passed. The snow had melted in Hartford, and with spring came an unexpected clarity, the kind that blooms slowly after a long, bitter winter. Ethan's home no longer echoed with memories of betrayal. It had been repainted, refurnished, revived. Not because he wanted to erase the past, but because he refused to live among its ruins. The divorce was finalized in mid-April. Lena received what was fair, legally speaking. Ethan didn't fight over every cent. He didn't need to. He had made sure her public image suffered the same fractures as their marriage. The world now saw Lena Whitaker not as the charming wife of a successful entrepreneur, but as the woman who gambled everything on lust and lost. Brady, now living in a cheap apartment outside of town, had lost not only his marriage and career, but also his reputation. Most of the partnerships Ethan had built within the business world quietly severed ties with Brady, without a word. There were no fiery confrontations, no outbursts, just silence. The kind of silence that follows disgrace. But Ethan, he thrived in the quiet. He'd started mentoring young entrepreneurs, helping them avoid the same pitfalls he'd once tumbled through. He launched a private foundation aimed at supporting men and women rebuilding their lives after betrayal, financially, emotionally, legally. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was legacy. Aria visited him every weekend now. The relationship was still healing, thread by fragile thread, but the love remained. One night, she sat on the back porch with him, watching fireflies dance in the warm air. "I still feel guilty," she admitted, her voice small. "About not telling you. About protecting Mom." Ethan turned toward her, a glass of iced tea in his hand. "Good. That means your conscience still works. But guilt is only useful if it fuels change. And you've changed, Aria. That's what matters." Tears welled in her eyes. "You're the best man I've ever known." He gave her a quiet smile. "Then make sure you never settle for less than that." Lena, meanwhile, gave birth to a baby boy in a hospital room with no flowers, no visitors, no father standing by the bassinet. Brady never showed. She named the boy Caleb, but the name didn't fill the void. Neither did the late-night tears, the growing pile of bills, or the whispers in the grocery store aisles. She called Ethan once, 3 weeks after the birth. He answered. "I just needed to hear your voice," she said, her voice brittle with exhaustion. "I hope he's healthy," Ethan replied, even and controlled. "But if you're calling to ask for help, don't." "I'm not," she said quickly. "I swear. I just wanted to say sorry. For everything. For the way I treated you. For what I did to our family. You didn't deserve any of it." Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of her voice pressing against the scar she left behind. "You're right," he said quietly. "I didn't." Silence. Then he added, "Take care of him. Be better for him than you were for us." And with that, he ended the call. Not out of hatred, but because closure didn't always come with an apology, it came with boundaries. A year passed. Ethan's foundation grew rapidly, and with it came stories. Men and women from every walk of life stepped forward to share how betrayal had wrecked them, and how they rose again. He had turned his pain into purpose, turned the ashes of his marriage into something that warmed others. At one event, Rachel, now an independent consultant for nonprofits, stood beside him on stage again. Their bond wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was something stronger than flirtation. It was earned. Ethan gave his final speech of the night with a simple message. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. If someone shows you they're willing to let you burn, walk away. Rebuild. Reinvent. And when they see the flames of your comeback, let them know, this fire is mine now. The room erupted in applause. Later that night, as he drove home under a soft canopy of stars, Ethan pulled into his driveway, stepped out of the car, and stood still for a moment. The night air was cool. The porch light flickered on automatically. Everything was still, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel like a man abandoned. He felt like a man who survived the storm, and now stood on solid ground, planting something new, something permanent. He smiled, not for the cameras, not for revenge, but because the war was over, and he'd won.